The first reading is from 1 Kings chapter 19. But Elijah himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a solitary broom tree. He asked that he might die. It is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my ancestors. Then he lay down under the broom tree and fell asleep. Suddenly an angel touched him and said to him, "Get up and eat." He looked, and there at his head was a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. He ate and drank and lay down again. The angel of the Lord came a second time, touched him and said, "Get up and eat, otherwise the journey will be too much for you." He got up and ate and drank. Then he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. The word of the Lord.
So my latest shop project has been to build a set of chairs for the dining room table that I built last year. This has been an interesting project for me because it's required me to use a bunch of skills and develop a bunch of skills that I have rarely or never used before. And most importantly, it has given me an excuse to buy new power tools. So that's one of the reasons that woodworkers choose certain shop projects. But I have enjoyed building some of my own furniture because I get a sense of satisfaction when I see that it's done. I know that I'm able to build it exactly the way it should be, and it's made of real wood, not the pressed stuff that so often you pay a lot of money for in the stores and isn't very good quality. And as I have been building some of this furniture over the last several years, it occurs to me now that if I do this right, many of these pieces of furniture that I'm building are going to outlast me. And that's because furniture is what economists call a durable good. And a durable good is something that is supposed to be able to be used over and over again without wearing out. It can be used day in and day out. It can last for years, decades. You may even be able to pass it on to your kids and your grandkids. In contrast, consumable goods are usually used up in one shot. So food is the actually quintessential example of a consumable good. You take food, you consume it, it's gone. The next time you want to eat, you got to find more food. In some respects, it would seem that God is the most durable good ever. Because after all, God exists forever. God never wears out, no matter how many people come to God looking for help. And God is never used up, in spite of the fact that people like me try to whine and complain so much you would think it would just wear God down. It doesn't happen. God is really durable. And yet, as Jesus has been speaking of himself over these last few weeks in the gospel readings as the embodiment of God, Jesus speaks of himself as bread, a consumable. Bread, after all, doesn't last very long. And as soon as it's gone, you got to go looking for more bread, as people did in the gospel reading 2 weeks ago. Or at least people will ask Jesus to continue to give them that bread always and make it more like a durable good that they're always going to have, as they did in the gospel reading last week. But in the end, bread isn't a durable good. It's a consumable. And maybe Jesus uses this consumable image on purpose. Maybe he uses a consumable image because all too often, people want God to be like a durable piece of furniture that they can put in their house and it'll just kind of be part of the background. Too often, people want God to be like a durable piece of furniture that can just be brought out and used whenever it seems to be convenient. Too often, people want God to be like a durable piece of furniture, which once you've got it, you never have to think about it again. And that's the way God is for a lot of people. But Jesus wants God to be a consumable as well, at least in the sense that God is supposed to be like the bread that gave Elijah strength for his journey in today's first reading. Elijah, after all, had been having a tough time. He was literally running for his life because the king wanted to kill him. And he was exhausted. He didn't need a chair to sit down on. He needed to lay down under the tree and somehow figure out how he was going to get strength to continue his journey. And so after he lies down and he tries to sleep, an angel shows up and gives him fresh baked bread. The angel tells him, get up and eat. So he gets up and he eats, and he lies down again and falls asleep. Now you would think if there was any durable, good type bread around, angel bread would be it. Eat one thing of angel bread and you're good to go, but bread is still consumable. So the angel wakes him up again. You know how you love it when people wake you up after you fell back off to sleep? The angel wakes him up again and says, get up and eat, otherwise the journey's going to be too much for you. So he gets up and he eats again. What Elijah needed was a consumable. He needed the actual bread, but he also needed the consumable experience of God in his life that would give him the strength for his journey. And so Elijah needed more than just actual bread. He also needed the consumable experience of God's presence in his life. See, the angel shows up in the middle of the wilderness where a lot of people thought God isn't going to be, and shows him that God is still there with him, that God hasn't forgotten about him, that God has not abandoned him, that God is still walking with him. That is a consumable experience that Elijah was going to have over and over again in his life in order to continue his journey. He didn't just need to be told, well, yeah, one time long ago and far away, God was there with me, and then I'm on my own. He needed to know over and over again in his life, God's there, yep, I'm still here, yep, I'm still here I am. And he needed to know that God was there present, journeying with him. He needed that experience, and that experience wasn't just a durable event, it was also a consumable experience that he had to have over and over again. Elijah needed more than just bread. He also needed the consumable experience of vision from God. You know, Elijah's at a point in his life where he's ready to pack it in. I mean, in some respects, he's done a lot of things and he's won and everything, but you know, even when he wins, he loses because he defeated the prophets of Baal, and now he's got to run for his life because even in his victory, he's lost. So he's like, you know what? I'm done. I give up. Take my life now, and you know, like, why even try anymore? I've had it. There is no purpose left for me to continue this journey. And yet when the angel shows up for him and says, get up and eat, otherwise the journey is going to be too much for you, he realizes that God still has a journey for him to go on. God still has purpose for his life. God still has things for him to do. The journey still has meaning. And that was something he was going to have over and over again in his life to continue to have that journey, to continue to be strengthened for that journey. He didn't need to just simply be told at one point long ago, yes, I have a plan and I have things for you to do, but I haven't told you anything about it lately. He needed that consumable experience of vision for him to be able to continue to have strength for his journey. And Elijah needed bread, but he also needed the consumable experience of community. That is, Elijah could not journey alone. He needed God, but he needed other people as well. So when he finally finishes this little experience of being, eating, sleep, eat, finally gets on his journey and he goes to Horeb, the Mount of God. That's where we have the story about Elijah hearing the still small voice or the sound of silence after the earthquake and the fire and all the other stuff. And the very first thing that Elijah does when he's alone in the cave and he hears the sound of God is he wraps himself in his mantle, he goes out and he starts complaining to God. And he says, God, I'm alone. It's just me. I alone am left. And they seek my life. He says, there's nobody else. And God says, yeah, there's nobody else except you and 7,000 other people that are still faithful to God. And you know what? You need to go talk to some of them. You need to go interact with some of them. And then God sends him to other people. Because Elijah needed other people to be part of the journey to which God called him. It had to be a consumable experience. And as you read the rest of the story, he goes out and he's interacting with all of these people. And that interaction, every day of his life, helps him to have the strength for the journey that God calls him to be part of. So, God really is the most durable reality in our lives. But as with Elijah, God is often most powerful and most helpful in our lives when God is also a consumable. And I think that's why Jesus keeps speaking of himself over and over again in this series of readings from the 6th chapter of John as the bread of life, as a consumable experience. Because bread gives you strength for the journey of life and for the journey of faith. And to experience that kind of bread in our lives We need God to be a consumable part of our everyday experience, not just a durable thing kind of in the background someplace. And so like Elijah, we also need the daily consumable of God's presence in our everyday lives. That is, God isn't just supposed to be a background thing of, oh yeah, I know God is out there someplace, and someday after I die, I'll go to heaven and someplace far out there. God wants to be a part of our everyday actual living experience, which is why, just like in any kind of relationship with anybody else, it requires daily contact, daily kind of interaction. That's why we're called to things like prayer and worship, and even consuming the actual bread and wine of Jesus' presence. That Jesus wants God to be part of our actual daily experience, so that like with Elijah, we can know somehow or other God is still with us every single day, walking with us on our journey, giving us strength for whatever journey it is that God calls us to be on. Like Elijah, we also need the daily consumable of vision from God. And it's important to remember with Elijah, like we've read the story of Elijah. If you haven't read the story of Elijah, go ahead and read the whole story, because he's really one of the few really interesting characters and stories you can read in the Bible. But as with today's reading, he doesn't get a whole lot of what the vision is. We know the story, and we know how the story ends. But all he's told, the only piece of vision that he's given in his life is, hey, get up, eat. Otherwise, the journey's going to be too much for you. Oh yeah, and take a nap. That's it. That's all he knows about the journey at that point. He doesn't know what else is in store. And sometimes we don't kind of maybe see the vision that God's giving us in our lives, because the vision God gives us at the moment may sound like it's something as simple as, you know what, you need to eat. And you need to take a nap, because you're tired, and you're cranky. And and there's something here that you need to do, and I'm not telling you what the whole rest of the story looks like, but I've got a plan for you, and I've got purpose for your life. And I'm going to be there with you, and there's still part of the journey ahead, and there's purpose and meaning in that. And sometimes just seeing those few little clues of eat and take a nap can be part of God giving us vision that gives us the strength to continue on whatever journey it is that God's calling us to be part of. And we too, like Elijah, need the consumable of community, in which none of us ever tries to go it alone. Instead, we also need the consumable experience of journeying together, so that through one another, God gives us strength to continue our journeys. And sometimes the most spiritually draining experience people have is when they somehow decide that they can just have a private experience with God all by themselves, and they cut themselves off from others. And then it's kind of like Elijah standing in the cave going, I alone am left, and I'm all by myself. And often God says what you need, if you're going to continue your journey and have that strength, is you need to go talk to other people too. You need to go be part of the community of faithful people that will remind you that you are not alone. God has not abandoned you, and neither have other people. God's going to work through you, with you, and help you through other people, and you are going to be the instrument of bread in other people's lives as well. So even though God is the most durable reality in our lives, make sure God remains consumable reality in your life as well. Open yourself to God's living presence in the reality of your daily life. Look for the guidance that God is giving you to continue your journey, even if it sounds as simple as eat and take a nap. And be part of the community that God has given you and called you into, so that you can both receive and share the bread of life.